Come check
Yo,
y'all out.
listen, you are always welcome.
I have a question.
Here in New York City, National Network, Reverend Al Sharpton, the daughters, Dominique Ashley, we welcome you. The family welcome you, brother. And we salute you and we support you. And I am so proud of a young brother being so civically engaged and mindful of his community and taking charge. I salute you, brother. I'm glad to know you, brother.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, King.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So that was Jewell Jones, y'all.
Can I ask a question quickly?
Yeah, please, George. Yes.
Jewell, thank you for being here. One of our challenges is getting our young brothers and sisters involved in the census and voting. What are some of the things y'all have done in your community in Michigan to empower the younger community to get involved in the voting and filling out the census this year?
I think probably the biggest thing, really, and I mean, we're still having to challenge ourselves. We're like one of my cities we're only at like 60% filled with the census so far. So I'm glad that it's been extended. But I think the biggest thing is not approaching them from that angle, saying that hey, it's about the census, about voting. We got to bring young people in from different avenues. And so a lot of times that might be bringing in some kind of a special guest or, maybe having a cookout. I think free food always is work, and just a time to really bring them together. And so when we get people in the area, maybe about a different topic or a different issue, that's when we drop the conversation about voting and the census on them. But I think a lot of times just because we've been so disenfranchised for so long, and a lot of the young people now are more militant, more, I would say revolutionary, that they almost want to just throw the whole system away. So I think if we try to pull them in with the traditional conversation, we're going to lose them. So if we can bring them in some other kind of way, and then have a conversation there, I think that's the best way to capture them.
Jewell, that was said, well said. George, excellent question. Jewell, one more question before you leave. I have to ask, somebody texted, do you have a girlfriend?
Oh, no. I'm saying I got to stay marketable for my voters. You know that.
Smart man. Listen, most eligible bachelor. Jules, take care. Call me anytime, man. You have friends here, brother.
Okay.
Care.
Peace and
that
love,
was Jewell Jones, man. Thank you very much. Arnold, give me a song, brother. Unmute yourself.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking down freedom way. Clap your hands, everybody. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round.
I'm gonna keep on
talking, walking
marching on the freedom.
Thank you, Arnold. Thank you very much. So I will continue with the history of Juneteenth. Now, we spoke about slavery, 1619. We spoke about the Emancipation Proclamation. No, excuse me. 1619 to 1865, 246 years of slavery. Chattel slavery, chattel slavery is a slave, an enslavement of a person who is owned forever and whose children and children's children are automatically enslaved. That's how they did it. You're a slave, but not only are you a slave, your children's a slave, your children's children's a slave, and they're all my property. This is what our forefathers had to go through. This is why when people tell me voting doesn't matter, I get very upset. Because people, if we do not remember the history, our past, we will repeat it. Reverend Sharpton says that all the time. You have to know your history. If our youth don't know our history, if they don't know 1619 slavery, 19 people came, if they don't know that lasted for 246 years, if they don't know that, they'll repeat it. So it's 1863, 2 years before Juneteenth, 1865, 2 years before Juneteenth, the President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation Proclamation. Try to say that 3 times. Declaring all persons held as slaves within any state or any designated part of a state, the people whereof shall be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then forwarded and forever free. So that was an Emancipation Proclamation, which some of the unions would not respect. And that's brought on the Civil War. And that brings us to Juneteenth. Now, this is why we celebrate Juneteenth. I gave you the history up until the moment. On June 19, 1865, in the most remote state in the Union, Texas, Galveston Island, Texas, Union General Gordon Granger led 2,000 troops to Texas on behalf of the president, and he announced, the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection, therefore, existing between them becomes that between employer and free laborer. The Civil War has ended and the slaves have been freed. That is Juneteenth. That is Juneteenth. And this is why we celebrate. And I ask Chloe for another song, please.
Okay. Yeah. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. Oh, glory. Oh, glory. Hands to the head, no man, no weapon. From against, yes, glory is destined to be ours. Oh, it will be ours. Every day, woman and man become a legend. They say, stand down, but we stand up. Oh, freedom is like religion to us. Justice is just to position us. When it goes down, we want it to man up. Oh, one day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. But now the war is not over. The victory isn't won. And we'll fight on till the finish. And there when it's all done, we'll cry glory. Oh, glory. Oh, glory. We'll cry glory. Glory. Oh, glory. Oh, glory.
Chloe, give it up for Chloe. Listen, I know we on Zoom, but I felt that, man. I felt that. I hope y'all felt that too. So, to bring on, to finish up our program, almost our program, right? On Juneteenth, oral history. We went through what Juneteenth is, what it's called. We went through the first year slaves came to America, the new land, the new world, 1619. That lasted for 246 years up to 1865. We have the announcement of the slaves being freed, Juneteenth. So I have to touch upon 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. And again, a lot of you guys need to do a lot of your own research and stuff like that. But I'm going to touch upon it. The passed by Congress on January 31st, 1865. This was before Juneteenth. The 13th Amendment was passed in January of that year. It wasn't ratified until December of 1865. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. The 13th Amendment was formally abolished slavery, was passed by the Senate in 1864 and the House in 1865. Now, what we need to combat moving forward is the clause in the Bill of Rights, the 13th Amendment. The first 10 bill is called the Bill of Rights. Slavery was implicitly permitted in the original Constitution through provisions such as Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, commonly known as the 3/5 Clause, which detailed how each slave would account for 3/5 of one person. This is still in our Constitution. It has been addressed somewhat in the 14th Amendment, passed by Congress in 1866 and ratified in 1868, 2 years later. It extended liberties and rights granted by the Bill of Rights to former slaves. The 15th Amendment, passed by Congress 1869 and ratified February of 1870, it granted African American men the right to vote. And on that note, I conclude my oral history on Juneteenth. Moving forward, next year Arnold Pinnix will work months ahead of time to do a real full presentation with the dancing, the drums. I want the African brothers' spirits to be with us. And we need to stay engaged voting-wise, and we need to stay counted census-wise. So I bring my panelists to the floor to speak with me, take your questions. First off, anyone has any questions, any comments, anything you want to share about the oral history of Juneteenth? Please, welcome.
Brother Perkins, I'd just like to piggyback off of what you said about the 13th Amendment.
Please.
I've had to elaborate to a lot of young brothers who come out of prison and they're bragging about being in prison. And I have to let them understand, first of all, the 13th Amendment says slavery is abolished with the exception of incarceration. So once you become incarcerated, you now become a slave. So they need to know that as soon as they are arrested and incarcerated, they become a slave. It's nothing to brag about. You are now.
Rudy, stop right there. That's a good point. I've been arguing with people for the last 2 years. We have a young man here at the National Action Network. He's the vice president and general counsel, Michael Hardy. I've had long discussions with him on this topic, right? I said exactly what you said, Rudy. The legal mind says prisoners have rights. Rights of some prisoners has been fought at the highest level in the land, the Supreme Court. So it is not similar to slavery in that sense, only because slaves don't have any rights. You can abuse them and do whatever to them, but you cannot abuse prisoners. But Rudy, you are absolutely on point on what you're saying. Don't get me wrong. I'm just wanting to put a little clarity that there has been cases fought in prison for prisoners, which separates that argument. However, we need to work on that 3/5 clause in the Constitution.
Absolutely.
That discussion is like this. The first Bill of Rights, the 10th Bill of Rights, they will not take that down to make amendments to that. They're not going to adjust that. That's a historical document. They will not alter that for nobody, nothing. So it's only going to come through by an amendment. So that's that. Anybody else? Okay, no more questions on this topic. So I introduce you, representing 100 Black Men, a good friend of mine, Maury Moore. She's also a member of Community Board 10. She's also a fierce community advocate about things. Maury Moss, we welcome you. And I also have my good friend, new friend, Isaac Asumani. He's from a Congolese organization. This young brother born in Africa, in Congo, and he's now here with us here. I wanted to get his experience on how Africans view African Americans. I mean, we all over here, we thinking our people were slaves in Africa, brought over here as slaves. We all twisted on the history. So I have the young brother here to elaborate on that. And this is really an open situation until our big guests get on in a few minutes. So let's just have some good discussions on this topic. So Isaac Maury, the floor is yours.
Derek, first, I just want to say this has been a very inspirational program. Thank you so much for your work in putting this together. Chloe and Mr. Pinnock, y'all ushered in, but Chloe, your voice, I'll keep telling you. And and it's so important that you discuss this 3/5 amendment, because that is so intrinsically a part of the whole census concept, as to, you know, African Americans having lack of resources and lack of inclusion into our communities. Our communities have historically been undercounted. Our communities have been historically overlooked, and we can't continue to do that anymore. We have to see real change, real fundamental systematic change. And I think that's why people are marching out in the streets right now. We heard from Jewell talking about how young people are being so disenfranchised right now, how young people don't even really want to be involved in the system right now. They just want to throw it away and say, forget it, let's just do something completely new. And I think that what they're doing is challenging what they're seeing in our communities, because they've seen so much blight, so much negativity in our communities. It's time to finally stand up and say, we not only need to be counted, but we need to be respected. And I think that that is a major part of what's happening right now. Census data shows that our areas are completely, consistently, and historically undercounted. We went over some statistics earlier today. Even Harlem right now is at 53%, when the city of New York is at 56%. And the nation, or no, the city of New York is at 51.9%, and the nation is at 60.9%. We have work to do, because we know that our lives do really matter. And that means that funding and all the supports and the programs that we need in our communities is necessary. And in order to do that, we have to be civically and actively engaged. That means making sure that we are counted in the census. And it also means that we need to make sure that we are consistently getting our voices heard in voting. And that doesn't mean just going to the polls and blindly voting for whomever. It means doing your research, doing your homework, doing your due diligence, and finding out who will best represent our communities. So it starts with voting, which we have an election day on June 23rd. And then we have, obviously, we have the census, which is going on, and it's been extended. So we have time. It takes all of 10 minutes to go online, fill out your census, and make sure that you're counted, not just for you, but for the resources that it will bring to the community and for the changes that it's going to make in our community. And this is just a baseline. Filling out the census is just a baseline for the budget for the next 10 years. So people need to understand that that's just the basic bare minimum. That's the floor of what resources will be able to be allocated into our communities. So if you can realize that this is a baseline of support that we're going to be getting for our communities, then we need to know how much more we need to do, how much more we need to fill out our census, how much more we need to be actively engaged, how much more we need to be counted, so that we can really get the resources to support the systematic changes that we need to see in our communities.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We have Dominique Sharpton on. She has a special
so sorry.
announcement.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Brother Derek. I've got to interrupt because we've got a very special guest that is coming on with us right now, and I want to allocate the time for us to address and speak with him. He took time out of his busy schedule to join us today, and we're honored to have with us, join us on our Juneteenth celebration, the highest ranking elected official in our city. I mean, what better way to end our Juneteenth celebration today than by hearing from and talking with one who has the power to enforce the laws and regulations that we as liberated people deserve to create and and live opportunities and access to success and happiness for us and our families. I met this man out in the streets, literally standing for the people as he joined us to occupy the corners as the public advocate for the city of New York. And I have known and seen him stand up for the people and stand with the people numerous times. And I believe that he wants what's best for the city of New York and for its people. So I thank him for joining us today to hear from us and to talk with the next generation of thought-provoking activists and leaders of the movement. Please welcome to our Zoom this afternoon, New York City's Mayor, Bill de Blasio is in the house. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Hey, Dominique, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Dominique, thank you. I want to just, Dominique, tell you, I really appreciate this chance to be with everyone. I want to thank you, Dominique, because, you know, you saw me out in the corner. I saw you out in the corner. I've seen you, you know, as an activist, you know, and I love the energy and the intensity of your activism. And I'm really appreciative to you, and I'm appreciative of everyone at NAN. I also want to say I heard some of Marie's presentation. Marie, thank you. I thought that was really powerful. And it is about empowerment. So I just want to say National Action Network, to me, in a world of organizations, it's never been accidental to me that the word action was in the title. Of the many, many civil rights and progressive organizations I've known over the years, this is one of the most product-oriented, and I mean this is a super compliment. This is an organization that actually wants to change the world and show that it will happen in a way that reaches people's lives deeply. And one of the places that I had the experience with NAN was during the silent march 8 years ago, when stop and frisk was the policy in the city. And NAN led the way to creating a whole different reality in the city with that march, and with so much beyond that in terms of organizing. So I just want to give a lot of appreciation to everyone who's a part of NAN, especially the leaders coming up, the younger leaders. And one thing that NAN has been noted for all over the country is an embrace, a true embrace of youth leadership. Now it helps that Reverend Sharpton, I think he was like 8 years old when he started. So I think he understands something about the power of young voices. But there truly is in NAN like an extraordinary understanding of the importance of developing youth leadership that many other organizations bluntly resist. And I think it is a mark of strength when an organization says, no, we actually want to hand the baton to the next generation. So thank you. I just want to say to you real quick, I understand in one way, and I also am the first to say what I don't understand, but I understand how the last 100 days of our lives have been shocking and painful and confusing. And just the coronavirus would have been more than we even could normally bear. But on top of that, everything else has happened to people. The extreme disparities, the fact that so many people lost their livelihoods, the levels of pain here are very difficult, I think, for anyone to fathom, but particularly those of us who have to acknowledge our own privilege and what we haven't experienced. But the pain to me doesn't tell me like we have to be hopeless. And I don't think it says that to anyone on this conference either. To me, it is like a clarion call that whatever we thought we were doing, and I think everyone here has been trying to make change in different ways, trying to build a movement in different ways, trying to get people to vote, trying to get people to do the census. All these things are powerful and meaningful, but whatever we thought we were doing, we now need to do something much greater. And we are in a historical moment that none of us could have foreseen, but it is the parallel in many ways to the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. It is the parallel to the New Deal of the 1930s. Each of those had a greatness we could only hope to aspire to. And I say it with humility when I make that comparison. On the other hand, these things are happening at the same time. A ever increasing civil rights movement with a recognition of the economic disparities and the need to address them at their root. So I think it is a profoundly transformative moment. And none of us could have foreseen these pieces coming together like this. But for everyone here who is a leader, it is a time of just tremendous potential for change. And I want to talk about what we did today in New York City. Because today, there's the power of message and meaning and symbolism, and then there's the power of the tangible changes we will make. Today, we said that we would make Juneteenth the official holiday of New York City. Schools would be off going forward. We would use it as a day for people to reflect on the meaning of the history. And Juneteenth, I think I can say everyone on this conference would agree with this statement that the extraordinary underlying tension of Juneteenth, that was the day people were told they were emancipated, and yet in truth they were not. A day when people were told the law now says it will favor you and respect you, and then for the 150 years since, we've all been trying to make that law true, and it's still not true enough. But we'll make it an official holiday. Today we commit ourselves to the work of taking the phrase Black Lives Matter and making it a permanent feature of life in New York City. And I was in Staten Island, and I hope you all see the images, because right dead center in the middle of Staten Island, where the ferry is, where the Borough Hall is, where countless marches have gone, appealing for fairness for people of color in Staten Island. That's where we emblazoned Black Lives Matter today. But the most lasting thing, I think, in terms of the extent of the impact, is our First Lady, Chirlane McCray, announced today that the city of New York will be the first city or state in America to have a Racial Justice and Reconciliation Commission, patterned on the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that began in South Africa, and that went to the root of what is wrong in the most powerful, open, graphic manner. That we all can say the word structural racism, institutional racism. We now have to uncover exactly what shape it takes in New York City today. And then through this commission, determine the actions we're going to take to reverse that racism, to redistribute resources to people of color, to redistribute power, to change the structure of institutions. Chirlane felt this very strongly. One of the things she said in the last few days as we were preparing, she said, this is a city that is built, many of the things we think of when we think of our city, the highways we drive on, where people live, the housing developments, so many things were decided by one man with a literal racist agenda, Robert Moses, who sought to create a city where people of color and lower income people were segregated away from white people. And it was never called that at the time, but that's precisely what he did. We need to come to grips with that history. That's not so long ago. That's 100 years ago or less in New York City history. We need to come to grips with the fact that this city was a center of the slave trade. And that the institutions, whether it's government or business or the universities, you name it, every part of our society was built on this same profoundly immoral foundation. And yet we've all found a way to, wrench some morality and truth and meaning out of a structure that was built wrongly. But the power of having a commission that's going to bring it out in the open is that once we can see the fullness of it, both the people who have suffered from the reality and the people who didn't necessarily even understand the extent of it, maybe I think many, I believe this, many people of goodwill who didn't even know how bad it was or the full truth will get that opportunity, and it will be an official act of this government. But the part that excites me the most, that I want to see happen in the next 18 months, that I will be in this position serving you, is then once we put this truth out there, how fast can we make the changes? So I'll conclude and say that I think it's one of these moments in history where everything is possible. I truly believe it. I don't believe there's any boundary right now. And it's about the extent of our own imaginations, and certainly how much leadership is developed at the grassroots, and how much we listen to the voices of the generations coming up. And not just in matters of racial justice or policing or how we deal with the coronavirus, but also how we deal with global warming, how we listen to the folks who are going to live the future and empower them in terms of the solutions we need to make. So I just want to offer that to you in the spirit of what I really think is tremendous possibility, even in the pain. And I want to work with NAN, I want to work with all the leaders here on what we can do over these next year and a half to change this city profoundly. And I thank you again, everyone. I thank you for all you're doing, and I think it's going to add up to a whole lot. Thank you.
Mayor de Blasio, for what you're doing, what you've been doing. We see you all the time out there. So we thank you for your work, for your dedication, and we know that you will continue to do the work that is best for the people. So thank you. We do have a couple of young people that are on from National Action Network's Youth Huddle that had a couple of questions for you. Malaysia Freeman, Pinnacle Garcia, are you both on?
Yes, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, one of my questions was, in what ways are you working to stop the school to prison pipeline? Are you hiring more African-American teachers and creating effective programs for youth?
Yeah, Malaysia, first of all, the best way, this is what we've learned as we've practiced decarceration in this city. I want to emphasize this. We have had a conscious strategy to reduce incarceration. And what we are seeing is how powerfully that changes people's lives and changes the life of the whole community. When I came into office, there were 11,000 people on any given day in our jails. Today, it's about 4,000. So almost a third of what we had just 6 years ago. And what became clear to me is how much incarceration occurred that was absolutely unnecessary by any measure. But what also became clear to me is the best way to reduce incarceration is to reduce arrest. You don't end up with people in jail if they are not arrested to begin with. Everyone can make sense of that logic, but it's so funny that in this debate in this country, in this city, the discussion, I think, often missed the root, which was, why are we arresting people? What was the purpose to begin with? In 2019, last year, the NYPD arrested 180,000 fewer people than the last year of the Bloomberg administration. When you arrest 180,000 fewer people, your jail population is going to go down a whole lot. So we're going to continue that. We're going to continue the process of changing the nature of policing. A neighborhood policing strategy says arrest is not the goal. Sometimes arrest is necessary. The goal, first and foremost, is to educate people, work with communities, address problems, mediate, work with community stakeholders, work with NAN, work with the Cure Violence movement, work with clergy, solve problems. And if you can't solve a problem, then sometimes you may have to give a fine or a summons. And then sometimes, yes, you'll have to arrest, but that's not the first resort. It should be one of the last resorts. And we found that that works profoundly. So that's, I think, the biggest contribution we have made to ending the school to prison pipeline is just take arrest out of the equation to the maximum extent possible. And then, of course, help our youth from their youngest years. So my focus on universal pre-K and 3K has been, I just know it, and every study proves it, that if you reach kids young and give them as good an education as any other child, regardless of income, regardless of zip code, you are maximizing the chance that that young person is going to have a very positive experience. So continue to deepen those investments and all the other investments in youth. And then the last piece about teachers, Malaysia, what I have found is you only change a structure if you put a mandate down. Mm-hmm. So we create a mandate, first to hire 1,000, then to hire 2,000 men of color as teachers in New York City. And with the support to help men of color who wanted to become New York City teachers. And we all know that was by no means the majority of our teachers, even though our students are overwhelmingly children of color, that we have not seen enough teachers of color, particularly men of color. But we made it intentional, and we said now the mandate is to go find every man of color who's ready, willing, and able to be a teacher and support them in that effort to get there. And we found we were able to hire 1,000 teachers very quickly. Now on the second 1,000, I want to keep building that because I know the power of both of role models and of young people being taught by someone who has shared the lived experience with them. I know how much more valuable that can be. So I want to see that just keep expanding. And I would say this is an area where I think all of you could have a profound impact, just like we talked about voting and census and all that, getting as many high school students, college students to think about teaching because it's one of the most profound ways of changing society. We need your help getting more and more people to take up that opportunity.
Pinnacle?
Hello, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, tell me your first name.
Okay, hi, Mayor. My name is Pinnacle Garcia. I'm the Vice President of NAN. My question is, what are you doing to ensure the relationships between youth and police are not developed around fear and animosity? Besides the Explorer program, what other programs are created to stabilize youth and police relationships?
I really appreciate the question, but I want to get your first name one more time because I couldn't hear it well.
Pinnacle Garcia.
Pinnacle?
Yes, Pinnacle.
Pinnacle.
Yes.
Okay, Pinnacle. Beautiful name.
Thank
All right. So we have to break that reality. You probably heard this week, the police commissioner decided to end the structure that was the anti-crime unit. That was a particularly aggressive part of the approach to policing. And as we deepen neighborhood policing, the whole concept of neighborhood policing is to connect officers and community in a more thorough, more real way, more of like people actually building relationships. And to focus more and more on young people, meaning that policing should be less about waiting for something bad to happen and then responding, and more about identifying if young people in the community need help. How can the police work with the schools and all the other pieces of the government and the community to help a young person on a positive path? So we're going to reorient what policing is in New York City. And then we also need officers, including senior officers, to hear what young people have to say. So we're setting up a series of town halls. We're going to do the first one in Harlem, and Aisha Sekou is going to moderate it, where we want young people to sit in a room, and I hope some of the folks here are able to participate. Just sit in a room and have a real open dialogue so officers understand what it is like to deal with the realities. And that the fact is, if there really starts to be a recognition of what young people are going through nowadays, which is, I think before the coronavirus, before all this, just the lives of young people are really complex in this city and challenging. And then to feel disrespected on top of that. And this is part of what got me involved in addressing stop and frisk, because it was just blatant systematic disrespect for young people of color, particularly young men of color. So we have to change the nature of policing further, where officers and particularly their leadership understand that if young people feel disrespected consistently, that's a formula for disaster. It will not build trust. It will not build a sense of common purpose with the work of safety. So the town hall meetings, we want to hire community people into the borough commands to bring the voices of community more deeply into the NYPD. We need more civilian voices and more community people to be there with the highest leadership, constantly informing them what needs to be addressed and what people need to hear to feel more trust. Trust is built over time. But I think it is, when you say the way we got rid of stop and frisk, the way we moved to neighborhood policing, the reduction in arrests, changing the nature of policing, emphasizing communication, moving away from strategies like what was done with anti-crime, showing young people that if someone does something wrong in uniform, that there will be some consequence, which is something we announced this week. The police discipline process is now going to be both a lot faster, it'll be put on a specific timeline, that if an officer does something wrong within the first 48 hours, there needs to be a determination whether that officer has their gun and badge taken away or whether they're suspended. And then within 2 weeks, there has to be a formal charge in terms of what happens with the future of their career. And that every disciplinary action related to every single police officer will now be out in public, meaning we're going to, because of the law passed in Albany, be able to say, here is, you can go online and know exactly what the status of each officer is. Not because we want anything but the day to come where there is nothing online, right? We'd love to have a moment where there's no officer going through any disciplinary process. But the accountability and the openness is part of how you change things. So my hope, Pinnacle, is when you add those pieces together, it's a beginning of a different kind of relationship and trust. And that I would also say for all of us, all the other leaders beyond the police, it's something I'm going to do. I'm going to participate in these town halls as well. I got to hear better what young people need to see and feel to believe that they are being treated fairly by the police, because that's what we want to get to.
Wait, I have another question. It's Malaysia again.
Hey, Malaysia.
So I know you were talking about like how you're working with the police to ensure that like they're doing their job and whatnot and of that sort. But I wanted to go back like to programs that you're creating. So what programs are you creating so that youth and police officers relationships are secure, whereas that youth aren't afraid when they're walking down the street, or police don't think that African Americans are going to act in a certain way? And also another thing that I want to talk about is like our education system. What are you doing to ensure that programs are created so that kids are able to do stuff after school so that they're not going on the street and doing the wrong things? And also what programs are you creating so that African Americans have resources? Because when I walk around in my community throughout the school year, I realize that a lot of African American children don't have a lot of resources, and they don't have a lot of programs that they could go to after school. And that's why sometimes they result in go to doing the wrong thing. So what kind of programs are you working with the education system to create so that students have resources and they have things to do after school? And how are you working with the police department to also create programs besides Explore so that kids and police can be like united?
Yeah, thank you, Malaysia. So I think in terms of relationship between young people and police, it's again, a neighborhood policing approach says it is about literal first name basis personal relationships. That officers used to be moved around, and now more and more they're being kept in a community. Obviously, this is when an officer actually fits the community, can work with the community well, can listen to the community, and that's what we're finding in neighborhood policing. We find the officers who really are devoted to that work, keep them in the same community, build relationships, and then what the commissioner said is then orient that work more and more towards young people and their families. That if a young person needs to have a conversation about what's wrong in their life, that they can feel that police officers are listening. They're not there to punish. They're not there to, police in the traditional sense, but to actually solve a problem. And a lot of times that is a young person just needs someone to talk to about their challenge and be respected and be heard. And I think you said it very well, Malaysia. We got to break this. This is part of what our Justice and Reconciliation Commission needs to work on. The pervasive American reality of a presentation of a young person of color in the negative light. Right? For me, I'm really, really learning in this moment to think about what it would feel like for so many of us who we grew up and our society was like, oh, you're fine. And you did not have to assume you were going to be portrayed negatively in everything you did or perceived negatively. So we're going to undo that by some, I think, big structural changes, but also literally person by person. And so I think the reality of neighborhood policing and the neighborhood and the youth policing focus is the goal for officers is to develop human relationships, young person by young person, and have settings where they can hear them and recognize that the path to safety for everyone actually comes with that ability to value the young person. See, I always thought to stop and frisk was just overt devaluation, the assumption of lack of value. And what we need to do is flip that and train police to see value. Now, some of that is neighborhood policing, and some of that is implicit bias training. And that's another part of the answer, Malaysia, that implicit bias training is now part of the NYPD training protocol for all officers. And it's not a panacea, but it does have a big impact when people get shown their biases and challenged to start working to overcome them. And then to your point about options for young people, it started with the commitment for middle school kids. We made after school programs free for all middle school kids across the board, universal. And when the world starts to come back to something like normal, we want to keep deepening that. There's a lot of kids who can get middle school after school for free, but they haven't been doing it. We got to do a lot better reaching them. But I think there's a very strong movement right now. And we talked about, a week ago or more now that we were going to take money out of the NYPD budget and put it into youth services. And we still need policing on many levels, but there is money that we can free up from NYPD, put it into youth services, give young people more and better options in the community, help develop their talents and abilities. I think that's the way of the future. And I found every time we invest in youth services, youth organizations, it has been incredibly productive. The last thing I want to say is, Malaysia, am I seeing right that your image flips back and forth from your childhood photo?
Yes, you are. It does.
I am very impressed that you managed to do that, and you were a very cute kid.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, I have another question as well.
Yes, Pinnacle.
With the NYPD's budget being cut, is there any way that the money can be put into a Know Your Rights program?
Tell me what a Know Your Rights program means to you.
Basically, when students are approached by police, how would they be able to interact with police, and how would they able to de-escalate the situation if it does escalate at the time?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think it's absolutely the kind of thing we can do. So you don't mind if I steal your idea, do you, Pinnacle?
No, not at all.
All right, but I will happily work with you and with NAN and Dominique. You'll be my conscience as always.
Thank you.
Let's see if we can do something with that, because I like that idea.
Thank you to the mayor of New York City. We thank you for always, joining us and being committed to, hearing us out and working with us on real solutions to empower and strengthen our community. So thank you so much for joining us today. Happy Juneteenth. Happy
Juneteenth. Are you driving while Zooming?
Something like that. Well, I'm not technically driving. I am in a car.
That is legal. You're allowed to drive while Zoom.
I'm not driving. I'm in a car.
All right.
But thanks again.
Thank you, Dominique.
Give our love to the family and let everyone know, keep up the good work, and we're definitely always praying for you, always with you.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you, everybody. Keep up the good work to you and everybody.
Dominique, thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you for listening to us.
You're welcome.
Hey, look at that. The mayor said my name. He knew my name. I feel good. Listen, that was great. Malaysia, those were great questions. Pinnacle, great questions. Great job.
Thank you.
That was great. Listen, guys, we had a big treat. That was a big treat right there. That was the mayor of New York City.
That was a big surprise, Derek.
Juneteenth to come with us, man. That was a special treat. We got word last night, couldn't share with everyone, but the whispers start building up. But Dominique, thank you so much for that. You and Ashley and Reverend Sharp, we thank you for making that happen. Stacy and Marco, everybody over there. That's the team. So listen, the mayor took up a lot of our time, and we welcome it. We want it all. However, I want to let Isaac speak. And Isaac, please share where your organization from and the work you guys are doing on the census. And Isaac, I came across on the census, and you and Mari and Fareen need to hear this. in the African community is a language barrier. In the continent of Africa, there are 50 countries, and they have thousands and hundreds and thousands of dialects. So the most common dialect between the African population, and Isaac, if I'm wrong, say it's French. So I know here they've been trying to get a lot of resources printed in French for the African community. So I want to bring my brother Isaac Asumani, and he's with the Congolese organization. Isaac, unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Derek. Thank you. I really appreciate to have this time and to be a part of this. Again, as you said, my name is Isaac. I am a co-founder and executive director, co-executive director of Beyond Our Status Congolese Alliance, all along with Lisa Davis. I think she's around here listening to us. I am actually a Congolese from the Democratic Republic of Congo, mainly known as DRC, and that is located in Central Africa. Let me go ahead and try to say that I'm very delighted as we all come together to honor and celebrate the Juneteenth, because I feel there is a lot of power in this day. I can feel it, because I just saw how everybody just shipped in the word, and the word were really, really powerful. And that is the power we need to go along with, as we all have been coming, to change and working together to see how change can pop up in our communities. And that we've been working on different issues, and most especially on the census, to help the African community to do the census. And I just want to jump on the point that you just said, like there is too many languages and how Africans can really, really deal with that. We have the French. French is not really a dialect, it's a language from Europe. I think you all know that. But what we can say, the main African language is Swahili, but it's not given that much consideration over here. Yeah, so as there is like more people speaking French, and then they just try to visualize the French as the main language that they just want to focus on. But there is French that I can call it, and all other people may prove it. It's going towards to be considered as an African language. And I believe also it's in the census package, and people can also do their census in Swahili as well as in French. So we have been working as the Congolese organization and other African organizations working together, trying to make sure the African community understands how we are part of this, because we are already here. Sometimes we can feel like we are African. We cannot really do the census because we sometimes don't understand how the census is important and how we benefit from it. That is the work we've been doing, trying to make people understand how the census can help to improve the systems, from the education system to the public transportation to the hospital systems and all other public sectors that we always depend on. So that helps to improve the life that we want to see and changes that we want to see in our community. So this day is a really special day, and I want to really call on Africans who may be around and listening to this. They don't need really to worry about their status, be it legal or not. Refugees to immigrants, we are all encouraged to do the census. We are all encouraged, along with our children, our young babies, to do, because sometimes you always try to kind of ignore it, but include the babies because they are also part of this community, and we want to see the changes, all of us. And again, the census helps for the nomination of those representatives. Those are really powerful, and the people we really count on to bring those changes we want to see for our community. And those are the people we want to push forward by just completing the census. And again, I want to just say it's easy and as simple as all other people say it, just by going to my 2020census.gov, and you can complete it in less than 20 minutes. And again,
hold on, Isaac, let's slow down. Slow down 1 second.
Yeah.
I hear Mari say 10 minutes. You say 20 minutes.
No,
when I completed my census, Farrain's gonna sign this. Farrain, when I completed my census, it took less than 4 minutes. So there's no reason not to.
No, yeah, of course. I say that.
Fact check.
It actually depends on the amount of people that lives in a household. So I did somebody that had 11 people in a household, and it took 10 minutes. So it can take 4 minutes for like one person.
Right.
It really depends on how many people is in a household.
But it is quick, easy, and painful.
Look, Derek, it definitely ain't taking 20 minutes. I can tell you that.
But listen, everybody, that's Farrain Griffin. She is the complete count committee person here in the city in Harlem, and she's on it too. We've got a lot of census advocates on this call. And
Can
I'm
I just
happy to have
add?
them all.
May I just add to what he just said for the
Please.
African population? What people don't realize that when you go into communities and the businesses are in their language and the ballots when they go to vote are in their language, that's because of the census. So when they complete the American Community Survey, which is every year annually, and it asks like about 75 questions, you know, your highest level education, the language you speak, that's how you get to have your ballots in your respective native language. That's how you get to have your community with business signs that are in their language, you know, in your respective native language. So we need to learn how to make it work for us, you know. So I just wanted to say that to all the African listeners on there, you know, on the call, that use it to your advantage. You know, this is how the country knows where the population of Somalians are, where the population of the people from Mali or the Cote d'Ivoire. This is how we know this, because they fill out the census in a state. And then for the first time ever since the year 1790, we are able to put our race as Black and our origin and nationality. So an African, excuse me, I forgot his name, but he can put you know, Black and the country of Africa.
That is Isaac. And that's where I first actually, when me and you connected the first time, we were at a complete count committee, Check Black, with Laurie and Esmeralda. But they are you changing from Check Black now? Are you saying it's different subsets?
No.
George, pipe in on this, George, please, George.
So when you fill out the census, they ask you your race, ask you Latino, Hispanic, or in a separate category altogether, just that for that category for origin. But for the purpose of race, you can put Black and you can put Panamanian, you can put Black and you can put from Nigeria, you can put Nigerian, Black, Jamaican for the first time ever. So that's huge, because now we can self-identify where our heritage comes from, our family heritage.
Still be counted as Black.
Right,
Yes.
and you also trace your family tree through the census. So this is very important. We don't want to cut off any branches of our family history. So we want to make sure we're always filling out that census.
So we don't have to go to ancestry.com. I got you.
Even when you go, even when you still go to ancestry.com, it still sends you to the census.
Okay.
Because the census has always been the count, the survey of population for this country, and you laid it out in your presentation at the beginning.
Good. Thank you very much, Isaac. Anything else you want to close with, Isaac? I know we're still in your thunder.
Yeah. The only one thing I just wanna add on there, because I believe there should be some people, or because we invited different people in the African community, I would like just to say, summarize it in French, in case there is some French-speaking people.
Please,
so
more than welcome, please.
Yeah, understand what we are on today. So, merci beaucoup, mes chers frères. Encore, je suis Isaac Asumani. Je prends cette occasion pour vous mettre au courant de ce qui se passe aujourd'hui. Donc, aujourd'hui, nous sommes en train de célébrer la libération de l'homme noir, donc esclave. Et on a utilisé cette opportunité pour vous encourager de faire le recensement. C'est pour notre intérêt. Ne niez pas ou bien ne négligez pas. Inclusion, nos enfants et nos bébés. Toujours my2020census.com. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Yo, my goodness. Listen, that sounds So beautiful. That language is so beautiful, man. Every time you got all the ladies here smiling. Everybody was just smiling when you was talking. Even my wife, she's just smiling like, oh my God. I hope my husband.
It's one of the romance languages like for sure.
I love that language. It's a nice language, man. That was beautiful, so Isaac. Okay, as we close out, I know we had my brother, he's not here now, who opened up with the prayer. I think he left. So anybody, my wife, Kia, would you like to close us out with a prayer? But before we close out with a prayer, I want to thank Arnold Pinnix. I want to take Dominique Ashley Shompton, Lisa Isaac, George Bellinger, Mari, Keanu, Dina, Farain, Wilma, Melissa. It's a whole team that put this together, guys. It wasn't just me, even though it seemed like that to George at some times. But it wasn't just me. But we had a great event, a first time. A Juneteenth celebration. It will be ongoing, moving forward. If I can help it, and with your help and your support, we can make this a yearly thing and make it bigger and better every year. I just thank everybody for coming out, representing for the National Action Network, Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. August 28th, the march. If you haven't registered, go to www.nationalactionnetwork.net. Register. When you register, Rev could get enough buses. Rev could get enough permits for the space, how many people going to be there. So it's important to register, even if you're not with NAN. It's important to register. If you're not a member of NAN, we welcome you to be a member. It's only $25 for the year. Come be a member, 50 cents a week, $2 a month. Come be a member and get all the information in the website. My name is Derek Perkinson. I'm the New York City Field Director for the National Action Network. And we had this event on behalf of National Action Network and Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. And if you guys saw my Facebook earlier, some people have been taking shots at our leader. And I'm telling them, don't shoot at him. He's too high. Shoot at me. I could take the smoke. So tell everybody, shoot it at me. I'll handle all of that. Our leader is busy changing the world for us, for the betterment for us. So give me all the negativity. I'll eat it up for him. So you guys take that to the street. You're not having it. No justice, no peace. See you August 28th. Marcus, what's up, my guy? Dr. Marcus Bright is in the building. Oh, I got to shout out John Malkin, all the way from Connecticut. My good friend from Ovation TV. My wife is here. Patrice is in the front. We had the young guy, Jewell Jones. How many people like Jewell Jones? Say something about Jewell. Come on. I saw that little swag. The boy had the swag. He's 25. The boy has swag. Jewell Jones doing big things out in Michigan. So y'all guys have fun. Have a safe weekend. There's some things going on tomorrow. If you guys heard about the incident in Harlem with the noose, so there's a big protest 4 to 7 at Grant. What is it? What is it over there?
Marcus Garvey Park.
No, is that Marcus Garvey? Is that the Grant?
Oh, Grant's Tomb. Grant's Tomb.
Grant's Tomb. I forgot.
You still want me to close out with the prayer?
So we need to let people know we are not having no nooses in our community. We're not having that. We're not having that. They didn't even pass the legislation on lynching, banning lynching. Lynching is still kind of legal here, and this is crazy. So we have to stay diligent, people. All hands on deck. Be a part of something. If you're not going to be a part of NAN, be a part of something. But we want you here with us. I love y'all.
Do you still want me to close out?
Yes, Kia, please close out with a prayer. Listen, if y'all want to hang out, y'all can stay and hang out. I ain't going nowhere. Go ahead, Kia. Let's close out.
You just mentioned something. You were speaking about the Honorable Dr. Reverend Sharpton, and you said he's busy changing the world. And what I have is not quite a prayer, more like a poem, and it is titled Changing the World. So I thought it was a great segue for what it was you just said. Changing the world. When I was a young man, I wanted to change the world. I found it was difficult to change the world. So I tried to change my nation. When I found I couldn't change the nation, I began to focus on my town. I couldn't change the town, and as an older man, I tried to change my family. Now, as an old man, I realized that if long ago I had changed myself, I could have made an impact on my family. My family and I could have made an impact on our town. Their impact could have changed the nation, and I could have indeed changed the world.
Ooh, snaps on that. Sorry. Standing ovation.
Happy Juneteenth.
Everybody, that was beautiful, Kia. Thank you so much. Happy Juneteenth. Listen, next year we're gonna do it big. Come with your Negro spirituals. Come with some good songs, some ideas. I'm gonna have African drums. I'm gonna have dancing. We're gonna have fireworks. We're doing it all. So stay connected. Get into the action. ActionNetwork.net. Get with us.
Thank you.
Talk.
No love. James Brown, can you get down? James Brown, can you get down for a minute? Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud.
Say it again.
Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud.
Say it again.
Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. You gotta get down with things now. You know that's what Cleveland said.
I'm proud.
All right. Happy Juneteenth.
I'm black and I'm proud.
Happy Juneteenth. I'm getting on the next time. I'm ready to have like.
We get tomorrow morning at the Action Rally. Right here, home.
No, 60 people.
Get in the movement.
I'm out here in the streets.
Move with us and get moved over.
Only 60 people. That's it.
When is Reverend Sharpton on TV? Tulsa.
All right, we gotta get over before we go under.
It's not the normal rally, 60 people.
When is Reverend Sharpton on TV?
Patrice has spoken.
60 people, that's for Rev.
Maria, what are you saying, Maria? We can't hear you.
When is TV from Tulsa? Because I've been.
When is he on TV?
When have they shown